Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is JGOD. In today's video we're going to actually try to give you the best tips possible while breaking down two different subscribers gameplay. This is something I typically like to do on the channel, so if you do enjoy the video in any way, please remember to hit that like button, subscribe with notifications on so you can find your way back to the channel. And if you're somebody watching this video looking to improve and want your gameplay broken down, make sure you stick around to see how you can get featured in a future video. So let's go ahead and get into the breakdown. And one of the things I noticed right off the bat with this player is their sensitivity is probably just a hair too high. In the description on their video, it says they're running a 1010. Throughout the video, I'm going to go ahead and kind of skip around so we can focus on those main parts. I skipped ahead just a little bit, but you can see right here, he was just a little bit off in that guy inside the box. He decides to throw the nade, which is a pretty smart move. Then he backs up just a little bit to get into a better position, which is a pretty smart move. He goes ahead and peeks out, but he does not even land a single hit marker. Typically what I'm seeing is when he gets that sticky aim and snaps on that target, he pretty much hits every single shot. But what you'll notice is when he doesn't get that sticky aim, his aim is real shaky. In the first gunfight, you'll see almost perfect accuracy. He lines up the shot. The other one's going to be a little bit wobbly, not perfect. You can see he kind of went from shoulder to shoulder, so a little bit of inconsistency there. You'll see that his inaccuracy with the first gunfight leads to him losing the second gunfight because he's not able to snap on. You can see how he went all the way to the left of the target, all the way to the right, all the way back to the left, and wasn't really hitting any shots. And that type of accuracy is perfectly fine if you go ahead and jump into a hardcore match, because odds are he would have one bulleted each of those guys and wouldn't have been a big issue. He wouldn't need a wiggle back and forth. He would have just crossed it over, got an easy little kill, and then gone back and killed the other guy. Obviously, since we are breaking down some core gameplay, he has to land about 5 to 7 shots depending on that distance, so you cannot afford to miss those shots. And unfortunately, there's not a lot that I saw from this gameplay that this player actually needs to improve on other than accuracy. And that's a good thing, because that means they're patrolling the outside of the map, kind of rotating between a certain area, predicting spawns and rotating accordingly, and then also pre-aiming the hot areas of where people are going to be. But if I had to nitpick just a little bit, I would say use your specialist weapon. It's there for a reason. You can actually use it twice a match if you're using this particular specialist, especially when you're at the halfway point of the match. You want to make sure you use it before then, so you can actually close out the match with another specialist weapon. So I highly recommend this player dropping their sensitivity from 1010 down to an 8.8 or a 9.9, and then playing a little bit with that ADS sensitivity, maybe dropping that to a 0.75 if they're still working with that 1.0. If you're a player that just enjoys that faster sensitivity, even if you're missing more shots, there's not really much I can do about this gameplay. But I'd highly recommend getting used to it, and you'll win more gunfights, you'll go on longer streaks, and your KD will jump up along with your score per minute. So thank you for allowing me to break down your gameplay. With that, we'll go ahead and jump into the second gameplay breakdown. The next subscriber stats are just a little bit lower, so you can expect to see a little bit more feedback on the gameplay. And the gameplay we'll be looking at is standard control, where each team gets 30 lives, and you got to capture or defend the objectives. So they're going to go ahead and run up around this corner. They're going to see a guy, and they're going to go ahead and fire at him, knowing that they probably can't kill him in the allotted time. So I wouldn't give away my position. That's not always the best play. Obviously with control, the spawns are a little bit more rigid, so you know pretty much all the enemies are going to be coming from this west side directly to the left of them and obviously in front of them. Right here they show a lack of trigger discipline. They're literally holding down the trigger non-stop instead of doing that burst fire method. And for the majority of weapons in the game, you don't really have to worry about that trigger discipline as much because the guns just don't have that much recoil. But when it comes to the Spitfire, one of the highest recoil weapons in the game, you're going to want to make sure you're taking advantage of that recoil trick. I did talk about it a little bit more in depth inside my Spitfire video that I put out a couple weeks ago, so definitely go ahead and check that out if you want a little bit more detail, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of break it down as simply as possible. And I think this is one of the more important tricks when it comes to accuracy. Black Ops 4 is the first Call of Duty to have what is called predictive recoil, which pretty much means every time that you fire your weapon, it will have the exact same recoil pattern every single time. So if you have a full magazine, go straight up to a wall, fire the weapon, the first bullet will start that recoil pattern and the last bullet will end that recoil pattern. And in a perfect world, you would just learn the different recoil patterns, kind of master and get in tune with the weapons, but that takes an incredible amount of time, and some weapons are too difficult to master, at least in my opinion, for the average player. So what you'll do as a player is actually trick the system into thinking that you're restarting that recoil pattern by releasing the trigger and then pulling the trigger again. And the time between shots doesn't have to be very long. It could be a fraction of a millisecond, and as long long as you release it for that fraction of a millisecond, restart it, it'll restart that trigger pattern. So if you're using the Spitfire, the first 10 to 15 rounds are pretty manageable. They kind of just go straight up and to the right, but then they start to wiggle all over the place. But once you fire about 10 to 15 bullets, you're going to go ahead and release that trigger and then go ahead and pull that trigger again. That's specifically for the Spitfire, but obviously each weapon you kind of get a handle when the recoil gets out of hand. You'll go ahead and release it and then go ahead and repeat the process. A lot of times if you do flip triggers or have trigger stops, that's going to help you with this process. So for all of my subscribers that actually saw the previous Spitfire video, have you found that little tip helpful? Go ahead and comment down below so people will understand how important that trick is when you actually use it in a real match. So with the start of the second round, they go ahead and push around to the outside, which is a pretty smart move. You either want to go to this right side or all the way to the far left side. You don't really want to run through that middle part unless you spawn on the opposite side, because at least then you'll have the high ground. In this backwards position, you're not really in a good spot to come out. The other people will have that height advantage. You see right here, they're camping out the spawn, waiting for the UAV to pass, making sure they know where the enemies are, and then get a couple easy kills. Again, you can see that trigger discipline. They're just holding down the trigger, hoping they land all the shots, and they're not really in a good spot. Since this is control, you note that the spawns are going to be heavily weighted in that particular area. So when you're waiting around in that area, you know the enemies are just going to keep spawning on you. So that's not ideally where you want to be unless you're in a full party spawn trapping, which people tend to do. And since this case really isn't that scenario, what I would have done is cycled back to the middle of the map, closer to my teammates once I took out those two players, which would have pretty much put you somewhere in this area. Ideally, you want to kind of control this area of the map because all the enemies are going to be funneling from their spawn towards you. And they're going to be running out into the open. So ideally, you want to sit on a head glitch, kind of get some cover, kind of rotate from piece of cover to piece of cover and lock down the area. So it's a lot harder for the enemies just to push out of spawn and directly into the zone. And this next scenario is kind of what I was talking about earlier about never pushing through this particular area because it's always going to be a hot zone. The enemies will have the high ground if they're peeking you from that window. So anytime you're spawning on this side of the map, treat that little doorway as a no man's land. You either want to go all the way around the right side and flank, or go around the left, or go up the little stairs and kind of go ahead and lock down that particular area and have the higher ground. I left in this next little part for a couple different reasons. One, they're just running blindly around the corner, which is not a smart move, and to also show how they're able to adjust their behavior. So that's a good quality to have. If you go ahead and approach something, you realize maybe that's not the right approach, maybe I got to change it up, I got to do something different. You're going to see them change their behavior so they do not end up having that same scenario happen. The other thing I wanted to touch on, since they are running Seraph, is placing that spawn beacon. Anytime you're going to be running the spawn beacon, you're going to want to place it in the power position. And on this map, the ideal power position is the upstairs area of this building. And one other thing to pay attention to when you're playing an objective game mode like this is to pay attention to where your teammates are. If you are playing solo, you can see that all the teammates want to go ahead and go towards B. So all you got to do is help out your teammates at B. Making an effort to go for A is going to be very bad in the long run unless you could just lock down the entire area, but most players are not capable of doing that. So the ideal scenario in this case is to go ahead and head to that power position with your spawn beacon. Go ahead and place it in the top right area, right in front of you right here, right on top of B. And you can see they go ahead and place that spawn beacon perfectly, and they have a good position here to go ahead and take out enemies. I wouldn't necessarily jump down. They kind of had a bad angle when they jumped. They end up with their back against the enemy, and typically you don't want to give up that high ground in the first place. So right here you can see they head down low, and there's plenty of teammates there. So ideally you want to sit up top. Even though you're not going to get those capture points, you're going to at least lock down that area so enemies aren't able to flood in and kill your teammates. Because all it would really take to kill all of you guys in that area would be a well-placed cluster nade or the use of heat wave. So what we've seen so far is pretty decent accuracy. They snap onto the target, so their sensitivity is not too high. Their issue with the recoil management is just holding the trigger for too long, but I think that trick will help them out significantly. From this gameplay, it was a little too difficult to find out if they really understand how the spawns work and when they flip, because obviously in this game mode, they do not flip. But I think with a few tweaks to their decision making, they could easily bump up their win-loss percentage, their KD, and their score per minute. So from what you've seen in the video today, what mistakes do you relate to? Which ones do you think you'll work on as soon as possible? And that pretty much wraps up both subscriber gameplay reviews. If you did enjoy the video in any way, please do me a favor and hit that like button. button. Let's see if we can get this video recommended by getting this video over 500 likes within the first 24 hours. And if you made it to this point in the video, hopefully you can hit that subscribe button with notifications on so you can find your way back to the channel. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you're someone looking to improve and you want your gameplay broken down, there's only 3 things you have to do. Number 1 is follow me on Twitter, which is linked in the description below. Number 2 is upload a video you'd like me to break down, and this has to be an average gameplay for you. So if you have a 1.5 KD, the gameplay should reflect a 1.5 KD. And for step number 3, all you have to do is link the video you uploaded when I tweet out if anyone's looking to have their gameplay broken down. And that's pretty much it. 3 straightforward steps to get your gameplay reviewed. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.